talking about the representation of Alzheimer's and gender in contemporary Bollywood cinema, particularly focusing on a film called Yumi or Hum, and Hum part means and us. And there's a...
What do you reckon? Are you okay using the mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to hold it? Which one hold it? Sorry, it's my fault. Bear with me.
1, 2.
There you go.
Right, can you hear me now?
If you just pull the mic a little bit nearer, that's it. That's great.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just repeat what I said. Looking at the representation of Alzheimer's and gender in contemporary Bollywood cinema, and with a particular focus on Yumi or Hum. And Hum is Hindi for and us, and I probably say a lot of Hindi words and I do my best to translate them, but I'll probably be in a Punjabi accent, so. This is informed by my third-year dissertation as an English student, and I looked at cognitive disability. Here I'm looking at disability and gender, and linking it to emotion, to look at the way that Bollywood treats all of these, marginalises it and controls it and restricts it. So, what I argue is that Bollywood has a set of prescribed values, and it sticks to a rigid formula, and that this formula has been described as reductively consisting of 6 songs and 2 dance numbers. Some sort of story. So the way I read emotion or Cripping emotion is the way that Bollywood presents heightened emotion, far removed from realities of its characters. And when it's presenting this romanticised view, it seeks to control the audience responses, so the audience is only going to respond in a way that Bollywood wants it to, and it has a certain set of traditions. One of those is melodrama, which links to the heightened emotion as opposed to realism or any accurate representation of a true lived experience of disability, gender or emotion. Some of the points that I look at is another Hindi word is Janoon, which I'll go into a bit later on, but it translates as either obsession, mania, or passion. And I think that the complexity of the translation looks at the way that Bollywood can reduce it to one word, where it's, if you translate it in a language, sense or as a reading, it's quite reductive. And I also look at the way that the Bollywood narrative uses disability or gender or emotion and its inequalities in wider society as a narrative supportive prosthesis as a crutch to explore the wider social issues that he's interested in, rather than looking at the real lived experiences of the characters in their own right. And then finally, when the finish is looking at if there is a happy ending. I'm not very hopeful. So this is an image from the very start of the film where the narrative is framed by scenes in a cafe where Ajay, who's on the left or the right, I don't know, he's telling his story, and the other character is Pia, who is suffering from, well, I don't want to use the word suffering, but he's diagnosed as having Alzheimer's, and there's a good image to illustrate how the film plays around with strangers. So he narrates the story as if it's a tale in itself, but that's actually his wife, and the story's about him and her, but mostly about him. So to go back to the inequalities in representation of gender and disability in Bollywood, someone argued that there was rarely a woman with a disability in Bollywood, and I link this to Bollywood's obsession with aesthetics and the way that it plays around with reality and an idealized world.
I've got an image. Should it be an image or should it be the text? Image, right. So it's the second image, yeah.
Which one?
It's an image of two faces on the top.
No, go back.
Go back, that was the first one.
Yeah. So, I'll borrow another word from Hindi, which is Nasriya, and which gets thrown about a lot in the film, and which translates loosely as a view of perspective. And I link it to the gaze and how that's treated when looking at gender inequalities, and to some extent the treatment of disability. And Ajay, the protagonist, talks about not being able to see the viewpoint even though it's there.
That one? Yep, got it.
So these are two images from what the film calls a bar song, and this is basically the protagonist being very drunk, but he talks about nasha, which is intoxication, and he talks about Junoon at some point as well, which I link as him being in a trance, and he has some kind of romanticised view of love, but it initiates his narrative and the way that he controls and manipulates the events and other people to suit his own aims. then if I go back to Junoon, and then, which as I said translates as obsession, passion and mania, and Ajay seems to use Junoon, Nasha, and Pyar, which translates as love, I think, and he seems to like mixing them up, but which is quite reductive, but picking out those three words helps me to look at the way that Bollywood ignores the complexity of the narrative. And to relate that to emotion links back to the use of melodrama and to a certain extent sentiment, and the way that Bollywood depicts this to the audience is through music and dance, rather than exploring it in a more multifaceted way, maybe. And dance and music is not only used in the songs, it's spread over the whole 2 and a bit hours, and it's aimed at being quite emotive, but to me it's quite restrictive because it's asking the audience to respond in a certain way, and if they respond differently, it's almost Bollywood reining them back in. And this is Pia's, well, they call it my book of possibilities, which Ajay conveniently finds and reads without her knowing, but it's just another example of the way that he controls the narrative as what is deemed as an able male protagonist. He reads this book and then he proceeds to pursue his desire by taking bits of Pia's private memories and imagination, and this is one of Pia's colleagues, which Ajay has reduced to tears intentionally, because he's meant to be a psychologist, and Bollywood think he's capable of knowing a lot about emotion, and then he decides that he wants to manipulate it. So he uses, this is a good example of how he manipulates the world around him to create his own fiction by changing reality, and the image under Pia's colleague is him with his internal monologue, almost boasting about what he's managed to do. But so he takes over Pia's experience of her life at this point, and the whole film is a voiceover of him. And even when Pia is asked to narrate a story in the psychiatrist's office, it's still Ajay controlling it, if not by his speech, by his movements, which I'll go into a bit later on. So these are images that I picked out, partly from the trailer, partly from the film, which are meant to represent an idealised view that Ajay has. Bia doesn't seem to have any input in this because it's Ajay going on a cruise and she's a cocktail waitress. And I think the sunset image was quite important because it comes in the middle of the film but at the end of the trailer, so the trailer will suggest no hint of Bia having Alzheimer's. And I thought that was quite interesting because one of the reviews did refer to her, quote, grave problem, which they need to get through and get over. But all of these pictures are quite interesting in the way that they use light and weather and the sunshine. And the last one is a sunset on their ideal book of possibilities. So this is Ajay and his 4 friends, and those are the other 2 couples that the film supposedly revolves around. And the same review that I looked at claims that all the film is about his love and these 3 couples, and then a grave problem that they stumble across, which acts as a twilight on their narrative. But I chose this image because it's a discussion that they're having about Bia, who is conveniently excluded, about whether Ajay should own up to his lies and storytelling that he's fabricated to pursue his desire. But it's interesting because this links to my point about gender, because it's quite divided. The female characters are roles for him confessing, whereas his male friends are more dismissive. And one of these female characters actually storms off to go and tell Bia, but she doesn't. It's interesting. And I read that as Bollywood alluding to reality, but being afraid of it. So he's going back to a dreamlike status, and dreams are quite prominent in this film, in the book of possibilities, and the way that Ajay narrates the film, because some scenes go back in time, and it becomes difficult to work out what reality is and what isn't. And the dream is also used by Bollywood to create its idealised or romanticised view, anything to escape from reality. It's almost as if Ajay's narrative is a fantasy and reality is anomalies that happen to crop up. So I think this is where Ajay goes to confess about his narrative and trying to justify it. I thought the mirror was quite interesting, not only in the reality and dream and reflections, but also the way that in any other image, you'd expect Ajay to be the one looking in the mirror, but it's Pia. She's made to reflect. And we only see him in this image. We only see Ajay in the mirror. See, the audience should question why that is, but they don't. So this is an image after Pia tries to remove Ajay from her own narrative, but he's still there and he's still narrating the film. And as the film has done before, the narrative comes back to a more traditional format, and that's them getting married, and what has preceded is made redundant. It's just going back to the idealization of impossibility. And these images come well over halfway through the film, and this is the first incident where Pia's Alzheimer's becomes apparent. So this is an incident where it's where she seems to forget, and there's no other symptom of Alzheimer's which is included in the narrative conveniently, but I found the use of rain, which crops up again and again, quite useful, and how it's associated with Alzheimer's. But it's the focus on memory rather than Pia's disability, which is important to Bollywood. This is more images of the same scene. I thought this was quite interesting because they're all of Pia in the first scene in the rain, and even though Bollywood's representation of disability and emotion is quite limited, the film techniques go quite a way to ameliorate that, even if it's temporary. So the two at the bottom is of cars going unusual speed around them, and then there's Pia looking at her house, which is also not how she would really see it. But I thought, even though disability and gender and emotion are regulated in a way by Bollywood's conventions, there was still some scope to explore it, even if it's in a mimetic way.
5 minutes.
So the last point I want to make is about narrative pastiches, which I've already talked about, but Mitchell and Snyder talk about the materiality of metaphor, and I link this to the way that space and spatiality is used in the film. And these are just images of Pia being confined in a narrative, so some of them are of her at home, some of them are when Ajay decides that he wants to send her to psychiatric hospital. And throughout the film, Pia doesn't seem to be allowed to move away from her home. Even the scene in the rain is outside her house. And like I said before, Bollywood uses disability, emotion and gender in its reductive representation of them as crutches, even though they're clearly visible. They're not explored in their own right, they're not given complexity or an in-depth exploration, whereas what Bollywood considers as a universal theme of love is given endless amounts of time. So, and the final point I want to make before I talk about the supposed happy ending is, I read something in Foucault's Madness of Civilization, and he talks about the public and madness, and the private or confined as insanity. And I think this is an interesting point to relate to public spectacles and the way that that links to the format of this text, because Pia's inequalities in different ways are used almost as a spectacle to explore other crises like marriage breakdown or something equivalent. But it's the complexity of Pia's own real lived experience is denied, and that's partly done through Ajay's own position as a able male protagonist, which is quite common in Bollywood films, and also as Bollywood as an industry. It's almost commercialised Pia's story, which is not really her story, it's Ajay's. And talking about the industry status, this character Ajay, that's his actual real name as a character, and it's his film, he directs it. And Pia, who's called Kajal, she's married to him in real life, and it's interesting the way that power transcends into society and not just the film. So, final point is this a happy ending? Well, according to the film it is, but in my opinion it's a bit of an attempt by Bollywood to tie together all the loose ends and the troubling aspects of the narrative which are embodied in Pia's character, and the way that he has a narrative arc which he wants to adhere to, and the explorations or lack of them of emotion or disability and gender, and the inequalities that are raised are treated as anomalies, and they fall off the radar, and that's shown at its best in the trailer and the reviews, and the way that the audience is allowed to be fascinated, as Murray says, in cultural fascination, but as long as it doesn't relate to their own lives, it's acceptable when Bia and her experience and story are treated as alien, but as soon as Bollywood deviates from that and wanders into some sort of reality, it brings itself back to its convention, and I've tried to illustrate that with the discussion about Bia's friend deciding not to tell her, and the way that Bia almost is forced in a way to accept Ajay's approach and manipulation of her emotions, and she seems to resign to it. That's it, thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Sumaira. We've got time for comments, questions.
With the advent of the internet and people having access to YouTube, do you think that more images representing people with disabilities, gender difference, whatever way you want to take it, do you think that they'll be more accessible to people now who would normally just have been flooded with Bollywoodization?
It's a word, isn't it?
And I suppose that I'm fascinated by the idea that is there also a parallel independent film kind of network taking place alongside these kind of films? So.
Well, the thing about the images, when I contemplated using a trailer for this, but the reason why I was put off because it didn't show any aspect of the disability. So if you're asking me if YouTube makes it more accessible, my honest answer would be no. And the Independent Film Network, when I did my dissertation, I looked at 3 different films, and when I tried to write my conclusion, I did speculate whether the regional language films would be any better at representing experiences like Bia's, even if it was not as accessible, because Bollywood is a global brand, but looking at the cultural context, I'd probably be wary, because it is the same culture, even though it's global, it is very Indian.
So are there no moments of resistance within the film in terms of potential representations of disability, or is it just playing the same old narrative processing games?
Well, when I looked at the other 2 films, and this one as well, there is elements of where you think it's going to resist, but Bollywood's quite good at reining it back, and the thing about the crews and Indian society's fear of westernization is interesting, because when you see this, you won't exactly see it as a traditional Bollywood film, but it manages to remind us that it is.
Right.
There is in this society, I think the image of the wedding was quite interesting, even though the first half of it is based on a cruise somewhere, I don't know why, but the second half seems to be reinforcing stereotypes. And I looked at saffronization, which is it's supposed to be looking at the rise of Hinduist national politics and the return to traditionalization, and the way that female characters are almost punished for expressing emotions outside what Bollywood wants to, and there's concepts like the fan, which is and then the women are also compared to either goddesses or whores.
Right. So it's a bit like Hollywood as well. But I think what you're saying is that there's something culturally specific that needs to be added to the reading of narrative prosthesis. That is perhaps lacking in people like Mitchell and Snyder.
Well, the reason I used Mitchell and Snyder was because I couldn't find a lot about Bollywood. The only book I found was by a psychiatrist. It's quite anecdotal, no references, just this is what I think, and my sources are talking to people that watch film.
Right. Psychiatry. Anyway.
But the reason I chose narrative prosthesis is because I thought it would be interesting to go against treating Bollywood as a specific incident. But as I went along the process, you see that Bollywood did have its conventions, but they are apparent in other film industries.
But it's an industry, a big money-making machine, which is part of the culture. Do you agree with that?
I would.
And the upper echelons of the society.
Can you repeat the last bit?
And the top of the society, like the people with the money, the upper classes, I suppose, or whatever would be the equivalent.
So, I wouldn't say that Bollywood is accurately representative of culture, but is bound up in Indian culture, which is predominantly based around Hinduism and links to singing, which is quite important. And the saffronization and the way that female characters are treated in Hindu mythology is pretty similar to Bollywood. But the Bollywood industry is made up of some of the elite people, and there is a lot of money. It's not the only money, but Bollywood stars themselves do control a lot of the culture, like the IPL and a lot of the channels, I think. I'm not sure, but it is linked to Indian culture, and it's more widespread. It's treated as some sort of accessible form for Indians living abroad as well. So it's almost seen as the only view of Indian culture that you would get. But it's not. I don't see it as representative, but it is bound up in the culture.
Well, my iPad recording thing says 39 minutes, so I think that's the time. Thank Sumaira again. Thank you very much.
Can I pull the mouse over a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to take this out of your way first. You can. There it is. Pressure. I'll bring you up now, we stick over here. It's time. Cool. So I'll just bring it to the last one.